Alright, so you want to improve your aim. I think you've come to maybe one of the right places. So what we're going to go through is basically a general setup of how I think about aiming. And that's why we're in a training battle right now. And then later on I'm going to go through like a full replay of, well, maybe shortened down a little bit, of some of the main kind of characteristics of improving your aim, how to go about improving your aim, because you can watch your YouTube videos only so many times, but until you actually take something and try and apply it in game multiple times, you're not actually going to improve. So if we take this information, apply it in your own games repeatedly, and if it doesn't work, alter it a little bit until it does work, and then boom, you've significantly improved your aim. Now, rambling all done. The first thing you want to do, if your screen looks like mine, you're going to want to change that. So you want to go into settings, then you want to go into controls, and then where it says alternative interface mode, you're going to turn that on to full. Now this is really important, and I'm going to show you why just now. You can see the ZOW right ahead of me. It's about 10 kilometers away. Now if you look closely, you'll see there's a little timer here that says 4.75 seconds. Now what that timer represents is, that represents the time taken for my shells to reach to this point in the water. You can see it on the minimap right here. See that little circle? It's the time taken for my shells to reach that point on the map. Now this is really useful, because you have to lead ships. If you know their speed and you know the time taken for the shells to reach a certain position on the map, then you can actually hit ships pretty consistently by just knowing their speed and their direction. Now, based on the crosshair we're looking at right here, you can see the 5, the 10, the 15. Now, this correlates with the timer right here. So say, right now I want to hit the very top front of this ship right here, and it's sailing at say 20 knots, because this crosshair is calibrated for 20 knots. Then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to align it where the kind of where I want the shell to head vertically, so obviously at the waterline, and then I'm going to adjust my aim until it's about, you can see it's 4.7 here, so we're going to go to about 4.7 here. Now if I was to hit this shot, there's incredibly high probability that I'm going to hit somewhere around this area, if you take into account the dispersion and, you know, accuracy of the guns and stuff like that. Now this works for 20 knots, a ship going at 20 knots. Now obviously if you get into higher tiers, ships aren't going to be going at 20 knots, they're going to be going faster. They're going to go at like 30 knots. I think the Azumo does about 27 knots, that's stock propulsion. You can get the upgrade that gives you 0.8 of a knot. But that being said, you're going to encounter ships that are going 30 knots, maybe DDs going 40 knots. So if that's the case, if it's 40 knots, this is calibrated for 20 knots, all you have to do is just double the distance. So if you get a DD, like a Shimakaze, going at, or a really fast DD going about 40 knots, you just double it. So you do the math in your head, 2 times 4.7, which is 9.4, and then you just lead by 9.4, and you'll get, bam, the head again. Now, this works as a general rule for ships going full broadside, and if you can know their speed, then it's really easy to get really good hits on them. You just aim at the waterline. But one thing I don't see many people touching on is, generally it's kind of rare you're going to actually see ships in the game that are just sailing full broadside. Well, depends if you're seal clubbing or not, but it's very rare you're going to see ships just sailing full broadside. So with that being said, you can see even right now the ZOW is a little bit angled. So if I was just to aim right here at the waterline, it might not be the most effective shot. So that, what I've said right now, deals with the horizontal aspect of aiming. Now there's a vertical aspect, which is really important when it comes to ships that aren't showing you full broadside. So we're going to shift over to now another little replay that's going to take that into account, and maybe I can pinpoint how to improve the vertical aim, because I think that's what most people struggle with a lot. It's not so much the actual lead of the target, it's more the being able to actually hit the waterline or hit a specific, you know, vertical part of the ship that actually makes your shells do damage and not just overpen or shatter. So with that being said, let's just jump into the replay. Alright, so we're in game and going through the replay. Now, there's one thing I forgot to account for here, in that when you load replays, they don't actually show the reticle, or the reticle when you zoom in. So with that in mind, I'm just going to describe what I did to actually improve my aim to this point, because it's generally going to be the same process. And there's a couple of kind of generic situations that you get into that can be applied for generally most ships. As you can see here, it's a prime example of me actually leading of a very excitable Italian cruiser Amalfi, getting a little bit out of position, shall we say, and he's basically sailing full broadside. Now, as you can see right here, I'm aiming it says 5.5 seconds, and if you can imagine the reticle actually being there, I'm leading by about maybe 5.5 or 5 seconds. That's why they land at the back of the ship. And I'm not entirely sure what the speed of the Amalfi is, so take that into consideration. Now, with that being said, I'm going to discuss the vertical aim, because that's actually the most challenging part of, I think, aiming effectively in this game. What I did to get better is, basically I went on Twitch and I looked at the list of streamers streaming, and then I took their names. I searched them up on, I think it was Wargaming Stats or something, or Win Rating, and I found basically the best player. So and basically watched their stream repeatedly. So for me it was like Flamu, because he's basically a Super Unicum player, probably one of the best players that streams. And so what I did is, when I would play a game, like right now, see the way the synop's angled in, I would note how the synop is angled, and I'd keep that in mind for the game. And then maybe after the game, I would go and I would watch a replay of Flamu, like on his YouTube, or if he's streaming, watch that, or maybe watch some of his stream VODs. And I look very carefully, because when you're actually playing live, you can see the reticle and where he's exactly aiming. And I would look, and I would make a conscious note of to adjust my aim to where he's aiming. Now this is not easy to do, and it takes a lot of games to actually, correctly get it to an extent, because it's very fine margins in this game. Especially if you're playing like a really high tier battleship, you're going to have like a 20-second in between each shot, so you have to make it count. But the process of repeatedly doing that and trying different angles until something sticks is really important. And this can generally speak to a broader point about actually improving as a whole. Generally, the way to get better at something is look at people who are good to exceptionally good at it, and try and mimic what they do until you get to their level. And then you have to make your own style. But until that point, you try and mimic as much as possible. And that's what you do generally with anything in life to an extent. So that being said, what I used to do when I was aiming at a ship that was angled away at me, kind of like the hood is right now, I would set the waterline with the reticle right on the top. So I would pretty much put it right here. Now that's wrong. What I gathered from watching streams, the right place to put it is right here, right at the waterline at the bow. Because the back end of the ship is actually angled away, so by the time the shells reach that destination, it's sliding across the water to an extent. So the back end will actually hit that point. Whereas if you shot at the first line at right here, then you're basically just going to get overpens on the superstructure, or your shells are going to miss entirely. And that being said, the Frederick Grove is actually sailing straight in a broadside, so again, all we have to worry about is the horizontal lead. And we managed to get 12k salvo, which is always pretty nice. And again, we're just going to punish him, because why not? You see, he is angling out a little bit, so I am taking that a little bit into consideration, but mostly you're just going to want to aim at the waterline, because he's too close. It's really difficult to miss. The shell velocity on these shells is incredibly important. And again, that goes into the point. even horizontal aiming is incredibly difficult because there's, well, not incredibly difficult, but there's a lot of factors you have to take into account, like the ship speed. And another thing I forgot maybe to mention is that you can tell the ships either in quarter speed, half speed, 3/4 speed, or full speed based on the smokestack. If the smoke's fully backwards or like fully blowing back like that, that means he's going full speed. If it's going straight up, that means he's stopped. So also take that into consideration when, you know, you're trying to judge the enemy ship's actual speed, so you know how much to lead. That's really important to note. Now, as you can see, the Baltimore here is going to start angling out. So now I was going to aim at the waterline initially, but now that he's angling out, I'm going to aim a little bit higher. And I want all my shells to cluster in basically one area that he's actually going to turn into. And we get a decent 10k salvo. And again, this isn't easy. This takes extensive practice. And deliberate practice. Very deliberate practice. And that's not easy when you're playing a video game to actually do. A lot of people, myself included, would just go into a game and start autopiloting immediately. It contrary to what people think, when they say they want to improve, they don't actually want to improve. They want to improve but not do the work to improve. Now again, usually right here, I would have aimed right here. But instead, I aimed a little bit lower and we still got the overpen, but it's a little bit more consistent. And again, this is still a learning process. You're going to miss shells, you're going to miss shots, even if you're doing most things correctly, just because of the RNG and the dispersion and stuff you can't control for. And this is a good thing about spotting plane now. Look at the extra vision on angles you can get from this. You can see exactly which angle he's actually sailing at, whereas if it was flat down, you just think he's sailing flat broadside. So now it gives you another degree of freedom to actually kind of perfect where you're aiming at, and we get 9k salvo with 2 penetrations. And again, I'm going to harp back to this, but watch people who are really good at aiming. I say if you want to improve at a positioning, watch people who are really good at positioning and mimic what they do repeatedly over and over and over again, and you will improve. My average damage on this ship's gone from maybe 50 to 60k to like probably 110k average now, just from deliberate practice of adjusting to the shell velocity, watching people who are good at playing this ship, watching several different games of this ship and knowing where to aim to get the good shots. And then deliberate practice. If that means going into a training battle and practicing repeatedly, do it. Now that means getting a load of bots. Just get bots in a training game, allow them to move, but don't give them armaments, and just practice shooting them over and over and over again. It's probably one of the best ways to learn, and probably the most time efficient way to learn. Again, this isn't all that relevant, but again, see, we aimed at the waterline. Previous to that, I would have aimed right at the bow, right here. Well, wait, I'm gonna wait till I zoom in again. Previously, I would have aimed up here, or up here, but instead now I'm aiming at the waterline, even with angled ships, or slightly angled ships. And that was a really big adjustment for me, because it's hard to get over the mental block you have in your head of how you should aim, or how you think you should aim. And it's with that deliberate practice that your kind of brain rewires itself to actually correct itself and have a better outcome as a result. So with that, I'm going to leave it with this little 1v1 where I get saved from being rammed by a beautiful salvo from the sun up. And yeah, so I hope this helped. I hope maybe you learned something, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.